Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bible Discoveries, the weekend show. My name is Corie, if this is your first time here, and I'm joined by my husband, Matlock. Hey, Matlock.
Hey, what's going on?
Ezekiel today.
Ezekiel. We continue Ezekiel? That's great.
We're going from Ezekiel chapter 12 to Ezekiel chapter 30. That is our entire assigned reading for this week from Monday to Saturday. And then on Sunday, our assigned reading is Psalm 104 to 106. So, we're going to do a recap of Ezekiel 12 to 30, but after the recap, I'm going to throw out this viewer question, Matlock, so we can discuss it. We actually have two. We'll see if we get to both of them today. The first one is from Jolyn Dobney, who says, "Hi, Corie and Matlock. I enjoy watching your weekend show, and I've learned a lot that I didn't understand." That's awesome. I have a question about Isaiah 63, verse 17. Why did or does God allow us to turn away from him? I know that he has given us freedom of choice and he created us with a curious nature, but curiosity gets us in trouble. Why did God give us a spirit of curiosity? And if we have time, we're also going to take a look at this question from Linda Sue, who asks, Isaiah 49, verse 5 to 7, is the servant referring to the Messiah or to the Israelites, specifically there in Isaiah 49. Okay, are you ready for those questions, you think?
Yeah, I guess I have to be. I'm here. I'm in the show, so I have to be. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's going to be good. Okay, So as always, interrupt me as we go through this recap, Matlock, if you have something genius to say, or even just you seem just slightly
No, I like
interesting.
the high standard because then I don't have to say a thing.
Okay, I'm going to lower it to slightly interesting.
Okay, no. Yeah, that's more reasonable.
More reasonable. Yeah. Okay, guys, let's jump right in. If you've fallen behind in your reading, allow me to get you caught back up. But if you have done your reading for this week, see if you can remember chapter by chapter what it was that you read. Okay, so Ezekiel chapter 12. Do you remember what it was? That first chapter that you read on Monday? This is when Ezekiel acts out the exile of Judah, and then explains to the people who are watching him what's going to happen. So he prophesies about King Zedekiah, because remember, Ezekiel is living in the Babylonian exile currently. There was a few waves of Babylonian exile. He was in one of those. But Judah and Jerusalem is still standing with King Zedekiah on the throne. So Ezekiel prophesies about Zedekiah, who is in this chapter called the Prince, that Zedekiah is actually going to try to escape from Jerusalem, but he will be caught and be brought to Babylon, which does end up happening. Ezekiel is told by God to tremble as he eats and shudder as he drinks. So he's acting out this great fear. And he's to explain to the people that the people of Jerusalem and Israel will eat food in anxiety and drink in fear due to the violence all around them. So Babylon essentially is going to come in and invade and destroy the land until it reaches Jerusalem. It's going to besiege Jerusalem and then eventually destroy it. Also in Ezekiel 12, the promise is that this is going to happen soon. It's not a far in the distance prophecy. You're not going to have to wait to see this prophecy fulfilled, essentially. Ezekiel chapter 13. Okay, so this chapter is really interesting. So Ezekiel is prophesying against the false prophets in Jerusalem. Both male and female prophets are prophesying falsely. But keep in mind, there are true prophets of God at this time as well. We know, for example, Jeremiah is currently, at this moment, while Ezekiel is giving this prophecy, Jeremiah is living in Jerusalem, also speaking the real words of God. But to the false prophets, the male false prophets, Ezekiel talks about them prophesying lies and delusions. They're specifically saying the Lord declares about their prophecies, and then they're expecting that God's just going to fulfill their words. So in other words, they're not actually receiving words of God, but they're saying the Lord declares. They're basically telling God what to do. The Lord declares this. It's like the declare and proclaim, and then God is just supposed to do it. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to read you verse 6 here. Their visions are false, their divinations a lie. Even though the Lord has not sent them, they say the Lord declares and expect him to fulfill their words. Against the female false prophets, Ezekiel has a lot of the same complaints, or God through Ezekiel has a lot of the same complaints about false divinations and prophecies, but he adds a specific sin that they're doing. The women prophets are also dealing in magic charms and veils, certain veils that they're wearing that seem to be about binding people up in idolatry, essentially. And I did a segment about that on The Daily Show. So if you missed that, go back and you can see a bit of a historical piece on what that could be referring to. Okay, Ezekiel chapter 14. The elders of Israel, elders of Judah, who are in exile in Babylon, they come to Ezekiel in real life asking for direction from God. But when Ezekiel goes before God, God rejects them because, he says, they've set up idols in their hearts and put stumbling blocks before their faces. And so God says to Ezekiel, should I let them inquire of me at all? Now, something interesting about that phrase, in their hearts, the Hebrew word in there for in their hearts means quite literally upon their hearts. So there may be a reference here to real life amulets that they're wearing, jewelry that they're wearing. We know that in Babylon, this was a custom. And in the previous chapter, we've heard God condemn the female false prophets in Jerusalem for giving out charms. So it's possible that they're wearing necklaces that have images on them. And they're using them like amulets or talismans or protection, things of that nature. So this could be referring to literal idolatry, not just an internal ideological idolatry, although it certainly also pertains to internal ideological idolatry. Okay, so this inquiring of the elders and their rejection by God turns into a cry for all of exiled Israel to reject idolatry and return to God. And God actually says in this chapter that a true prophet of God at this point in history would not answer a person like these elders. And if they did, they'd be judged for answering a person engaged in idolatry who's coming to inquire of the Lord. And the chapter continues to describe the coming judgment of Jerusalem. Ezekiel chapter 15, the people in Jerusalem are compared quite brutally to the useless wood of a vine, which is good for nothing except as fuel for fire. In Ezekiel chapter 16, we see Jerusalem, like the physical city of Jerusalem, envisioned as a child of an Amorite father and a Hittite mother. So this harkens back to the people groups who originally founded the city of Jerusalem. But we're told that the city, this child, was abandoned while it was still bloody with the umbilical cord on it until God saw it. So it's this abandoned newborn baby. But God saw it. He said, live. He helped it grow. And then we're told eventually God entered a covenant relationship with the city. Here, it's envisioned as a marriage covenant, that God gave her royal garments, placed a crown on her head, gave her the very best food. And yet, despite these things, the city became a prostitute, spurning the covenant it had with God, and even like celebrating that it was spurning this rebellion, even sacrificing her children to idols. The alliances that Jerusalem made with other nations in real life are envisioned as adulterous affairs. And God even says it's even beyond the sin of prostitution because it wasn't even advantageous prostitution. You're not getting paid for your prostitution. He says, like, you're the only prostitute who pays others to be a prostitute. You didn't need the money, basically, because God was providing for you. And so this is the reason why the city is being rejected and punished for their outrageous treatment of God. Okay, Ezekiel chapter 17. Okay, we get this allegory of two eagles and a vine. And so this directly correlates with what happened historically. So I'm going to try to break it down. It's essentially a riddle. So it's supposed to be challenging to understand, but God does give us the basic answer in chapter 17. So here's how I understand it, okay? So the first part of the allegory is that there is a first eagle who plucks the top of a cedar tree and takes it away. Then he plants a seedling of the land in fertile soil, and it sprouts, and it becomes a low-spreading vine. That's interesting because it's a vine rather than what we would have expected, which is a tree, because he's planted a seedling and it becomes a low-spreading vine. So the interpretation here is that the first eagle is Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. He plucks the top of the cedar tree, and the cedar tree is David's dynasty. So the very top of David's dynasty was the new ruling king in Jerusalem, who was King Jehoiachin, whom Nebuchadnezzar took from the throne of David and brought him to Babylon. The seedling he then plants in its place is King Zedekiah. But King Zedekiah doesn't grow into what he was expected to be, a tree, because he rebels against his planter, against Nebuchadnezzar. And instead, he becomes a low-spreading vine. Okay, so then the second part of the vision here, the second eagle, the vine that's growing in Jerusalem, it sends out its roots out of the ground to this second eagle and its branches as well. So it's roots that are supposed to be in the ground and its branches are all going towards this second eagle. And God asks, will this vine thrive? And the answer is an obvious no. So the interpretation here is that the second eagle is the Pharaoh of Egypt, that King Zedekiah, that low-spreading vine, and the remainder of the people in Jerusalem turned to for help. But it was all for naught because Egypt couldn't save them. Now, this chapter ends with God himself picking a shoot from the cedar, so from the line of David, and planting it in Israel and growing it into a mighty tree. And this I would say relates to the branch or the shoot prophecies in Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Zechariah. Okay, I know that was a lot. So let's move on to Ezekiel chapter 18. Okay, so apparently the people in Jerusalem were complaining that God was punishing them for the sins of their fathers rather than their own sin. And I can kind of understand this. That the current generation feels like the older generation messed things up. And now they're living with the economy, with the politics, with the social results of their parents' and grandparents' generation. In a certain sense, every generation feels this. We feel this. Like, look at online culture for millennials right now. We love to blame the boomers, right, for all of our problems. So apparently the people in Jerusalem were doing this. They're complaining that God's punishing them for the sins of their fathers rather than their own sins. But God corrects this thinking. He says, no, I'm punishing you for your sin. The one who sins is the one who will die. So while it is true, it was true that the fathers of the people had set them up to fail, in a sense, by passing on evil and tainted religious practices. They inherited their politics. They inherited their culture. They inherited their religious beliefs. It is also true that God had given the people true prophets. He had sent his word directly to that generation, and he had put them in situations to cause them to come back to him. He had provided a way back, and they didn't take it. So we will all answer for our own actions, our own reactions, our own responses to the situations that we are in. There's this call in this chapter: repent and live. I find it amazing how relatable the past is. Don't you think?
Yeah.
I think it's very, very applicable situationally to where we find ourselves today. So I'm sure it's been like that in each generation. Okay, Ezekiel 19. This is a lament for the kings of Jerusalem. It's sad. For Jehoahaz, who was taken to Egypt, and either for Jehoiachin or Zedekiah, who end up being taken to Babylon, a mourning cry. Ezekiel chapter 20. Okay, so the elders of the people come to Ezekiel again to inquire of the Lord, and God again rejects them. God has Ezekiel confront the elders with the history of Israel's rebellion against God. And then he asks them, are you going to stop doing these same things? Outlines the rebellion that's gone on in the past, and then accuses them not of bearing the responsibility for the past, but of doing the same things that had been done in the past. You are doing the same things. At the end of the chapter, Ezekiel says, Sovereign Lord, they're saying of me, isn't he just telling parables? So they're not believing the prophet Ezekiel. They're thinking he's just telling them, like, it's just a moral teaching. It's just, he's challenging us, but they're not really taking his words seriously. Ezekiel chapter 21. This is all about how Babylon will be used as a sword of judgment against Judah. The king of Babylon, who remember is Nebuchadnezzar, will stop at a fork in the road. So Ezekiel's prophesying his war path because he's actively building the Babylonian Empire. So he says he's going to stop at a fork in the road, and he's going to have to decide between attacking Rabbah, the capital city of the Ammonites, or Jerusalem, the capital city of Judah. So he's going to use divination, and it's going to fall to Jerusalem. He talks about how Zedekiah the king, the priests, and the city of Jerusalem itself will have to take off the turban and the crown. They are not fit to wear them any longer. So remember, the priests wore turbans, the king wore a crown. The city of Jerusalem was symbolically seen to wear both of those because it was not only the royal city of the kings, but it was the seat of religious power with the temple in it, the turban and the crown. And they're going to be forced to relinquish both. Ezekiel chapter 22, this is all about how God has reached the end of his rope with Judah, with the kings of Judah, and with all of their moral failures. So he talks about how the kings and priests have led the people into sin, and how the prophets have chosen to whitewash it all with false promises and visions. So there's a system of corruption that's not just the political leaders of Israel, it's also the religious leaders of Israel, both the high up ones in the temple and the lower down ones in the prophets. Ezekiel chapter 23, this is a graphic and awful chapter, quite frankly. It envisions Israel and Judah, the split kingdom of Israel, as adulterous women. And the point of it is exposing the dependence that Israel and Judah had on Egypt as a personal insult to God, just as idolatry is an insult to the spouse. God calls the nations prostitutes. He says, you've ceased being a spouse and now you're a prostitute. Samaria, the capital city in Israel, was bad and was destroyed. Judah's actually worse and will also be destroyed. Ezekiel chapter 24. This is a prophecy given to Ezekiel on the day that Jerusalem was being besieged by Nebuchadnezzar, by Babylon. So the Babylonian military had surrounded Jerusalem and cut off the supply lines. Ezekiel is told to put a copper cooking pot full of water on a fire and put meat in it to cook. And essentially, this play is an image of the judgment on Jerusalem. The meat will be cooked, it will be removed, charred, and the city will be cleansed by destruction. Brutal. Also in this chapter, Ezekiel's wife dies, and God does not allow Ezekiel to go through the physical mourning practices of his culture. So he's not allowed to wear sackcloth and ashes, sit outside, wail, or sing laments. He is commanded to groan inwardly, quietly, and that would have been a very shocking thing to the people, and they're going to ask him why. And he is to respond that the delight of their eyes, which is Jerusalem and the temple, will be destroyed, but they will not be able to mourn, but will have to groan inwardly. Ezekiel chapter 25. This is prophecies against other nations other than Jerusalem and Judah. They get a break here. So there's prophecies against Ammon, Moab, Edom, and Philistia. So basically, this is all about how these nations treated Judah scornfully in the day of her disaster. Ezekiel chapter 26, this is against Tyre, the city of Tyre. And actually, this prophecy against Tyre is going to last for 3 chapters. We're told here that Tyre saw the fall of Jerusalem as an opportunity for more trade. Like, oh, good, Jerusalem's going down, more business for me, because Jerusalem controlled some trade routes. But God says Tyre is going to be totally destroyed. It foretells the success of Nebuchadnezzar against Tyre, and historically he did defeat the mainland city of Tyre, but there was also a section of the city of Tyre that was on an island, and the island city would survive to the time period of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, and Alexander the Great he ended up decimating the island city. Ezekiel chapter 27 is a lament over the city of Tyre, a mourning, a description how great she was, but how like a ship in a storm, she's going to be shipwrecked. Ezekiel chapter 28, this is continuing that prophecy against Tyre, this time specifically against the king of Tyre. So there's a description of Tyre's great pride and then God's response. Basically, you think that you're a god, but you're going to die like a mortal man in battle. Not even a mortal man who gets to go down in like this warrior's grave holding the spoils of war and his sword, but you're going to die like in battle with no glory and the birds picking at your corpse, and it's brutal.
Yes.
In a prophecy addressed to the king of Tyre, Ezekiel uses Genesis creation imagery. So the king is envisioned as a cherub in Eden, and the fall of Tyre is compared either to the sin of Satan or the sin of mankind. And some take this to be a prophecy directly about Satan, while others say that this prophecy is using this symbolism to show that this has happened before. Basically, like the sin of pride is absolutely devastating, and it's repeated by fallen creatures, and specifically by kings. Sidon also makes an appearance here as a city related to Tyre. It's a city, like a sister city, how she too will fall. Last 2 chapters here, Ezekiel chapter 29. This introduces a long section dealing with, do you remember? Egypt, dealing with Egypt. So Pharaoh is envisioned as a great monster lying in the streams of the Nile. So probably a Nile crocodile, famously vicious, who will be caught and brought into the desert. It's said that they've been a false friend to Judah and Israel, so Egypt will be taken captive for 40 years and then brought back, but will never again be able to rise to the kind of power it had before. And in this chapter, in Ezekiel chapter 29, God actually says, because Nebuchadnezzar did not get the kind of war spoils that he was hoping for from the city of Tyre, because he was only able to capture the mainland city, not the island city, God's going to allow him to take a wild amount of spoil from Egypt. And then in Ezekiel chapter 30, there's a lament over Egypt. And that's it. That is our reading. That was our reading for this week, other than the Psalms. I'm not going to recap the Psalms. What do you think about that, Malak?
No, I think that's really good. I didn't say anything because I was just enjoying the recap. No, there's a lot obviously going on in Ezekiel's prophecies. I do like when Ezekiel's prophesying against the prince of Tyre, and then it goes on to again that famous verse about Satan in the Garden of Eden and these different things. But the very opening line is the Son of Man, Prince of Tyre. Right? It goes on to say, because your heart is proud, and you have said, I am a god. I sit in the seat of the gods, in the heart of the seas. Yet you are but a man and no god, though you make your heart like the heart of a god. And it goes on to explain that you think you're wiser than Daniel, all these different things.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that is it does that, and then it goes on later in the chapter to talk about Satan, who claimed to be a god. And of course, You look at like the old ancient cosmology, what we would call angels would be lowercase g gods. Like these fallen angels, these ones who took on the name of God for themselves.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what Satan is. So again, so that he relates this pride that he has to the pride of Satan from the very beginning, and how they're going to fall in the same way.
Yes.
Of course, the heart of all sin boils down to pride. And no, I just it's a wonderful chapter just to understand like the depths of pride and all these things. But yeah, no, I think that's great. I think everything you said was wonderful and good. Corie?
All right. Well, why don't we move on to our viewer question then?
Let's do it.
Okay. Our first viewer question, Jolyn Dobney. Hi, Corie and Matlock. I enjoy watching your weekend show, and I've learned a lot that I didn't understand. I have a question about Isaiah 63, verse 17. Why did or does God allow us to turn away from him? I know that he's given us freedom of choice and he created us with a curious nature, but curiosity gets us in trouble. Why did God give us a spirit of curiosity? What do you think, Matlock?
Okay, so now I don't think that this particular verse is dealing with that per se.
Curiosity.
Isaiah 63, you said, verses
17.
Verse 17?
Yep, 63:17.
Yeah.
Which says, "Why, Lord, do you make us wander from your ways and harden our hearts so we do not revere you? Return for the sake of your servants, the tribes that are your inheritance."
Yeah, so this is not per se having to do with curiosity or like the free will discussion, like per se in that zone. It's talking about how God hardens some people's hearts and he has compassion when he has compassion and these different things. This is actually a different kind of discussion, this verse itself, which we've addressed in the past several times. But I think to do with curiosity, I don't think curiosity is inherently a bad thing. So I don't want to say that we say curiosity killed the cat, but that doesn't mean curiosity is a bad thing. Of course, we're just talking about pride is like the root cause of all different kinds of sin. And from pride just come lies, evil, coveting, all these different kinds of sin, lust, avarice, right? Go down the list, gluttony. And so when we're dealing with curiosity, there's nothing wrong inherently with being curious about knowing something. It depends how you use your curiosity. It's the same thing with the mind, with wisdom, with reason, with everything. It's like there's nothing wrong with being, let's say, reasonable. But if you're just using reason and there's no morality, then there's a problem, right? You're just a machine. So there's nothing wrong with being curious in and of itself and desiring to know something that you don't know. Of course, that desire, if you break it down, the desire to know God, right? Because you are inherently alienated from the love of God by nature, a child of wrath. Therefore, this curiosity to know where you come from, to know who made you and who made your soul and these different things, and to know why you're sinful and these different things. These are curious ideas. And God invites that in, like, look, you're a sinner, right? These different things. And he invites you to be freed from that, to have communion with him, to be restored. So curiosity doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's restorative if it's applied properly. So I don't think curiosity is a bad thing. It depends on what the curiosity is for, the purpose of it, to whom it's glorifying, and these different things. If you're curious towards things that God has forbidden, let's say sorcery, like, yeah, but these dark things, God says they're dark, but are they really? Well, then you're just going against something God has said that's wrong. So that would be an improper use of curiosity. And there's good reasons for why they're wrong. And God would establish those reasons, and he makes it evident why they're wrong. And then, so that would be that. So it's like there's explanations for these things. And so, Corie, what do you have to say to this? Because I just think, in general, I just don't think curiosity itself is, quote unquote, the spirit of curiosity is an issue.
No, definitely not. So, I mean, I immediately think to Jeremiah 33:3, where God says to Jeremiah, "Call to me, and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." So God wants this interaction from Jeremiah. He wants Jeremiah to ask him questions. Inherently, he wants him to be curious. And I mean, we think about Adam and Eve walking in the garden, and they clearly didn't know anything because they were able to be sideswept by the serpent's challenge of God's nature and God's character. So they began to doubt God. But look, what would have happened if they had taken that doubt and asked God about it, been curious about, rather than indulging the doubt, been curious about the doubt and asked God about it? And they would have had opportunity to ask God about it. We know this because it's insinuated in the part where they hear the sound of God coming for his walk in the garden. And so they hide themselves after they've already sinned. They could have just waited until God was walking in the garden and gone and been like, hey, so this is what the snake said. What do you think about this? What do you think? But it's this like lack of trust that they indulged their doubt and decided not to trust in the nature of the Father and the nature of the Creator. And so there's definitely this, I mean, because we're fallen human beings, we can corrupt anything. So it can be a true, proverb, curiosity killed the cat. It can be a true proverb. Like what you're saying with, in what way are you expressing your curiosity? Yeah. Are you expressing your curiosity into the things that God has said, do not go there? For example, unfortunately, an example that comes to my mind really quickly is people exploring the area of the occult and the area of tarot cards or divination. There's a huge trend of that. There probably always has been. I'm just noticing it in my circle of acquaintances recently, where we're curious about these things because we like the idea of having power. We like the idea of being able to see something that other people can't see, you know, and having a little bit of a different doorway into knowledge and secret power and secret knowledge, all of that. But that would be an example of a curiosity inappropriately expressed, because God has put limits on our curiosity. He has, and he hasn't done that like Satan would tell us to hurt us. The limitation on Adam and Eve with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it was a boundary that was there to protect them.
Yeah.
God still has those boundaries for us. So indulging a curiosity into an area where God has said do not tread can be a curiosity that kills the cat. But you can express that curiosity in a good way by going to God and saying, well, why? Like there's a positive way and a negative way to express these things.
Another way of seeing it is curiosity with contentment is a good thing. So
that's a good way to put it.
If you're content, right, you could be curious, but at least you're safeguarded against going too far. And so that's essentially, an application of that. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's a good answer, Corie.
It's like children, right? It's without curiosity, we don't learn, we don't grow, we don't add to our knowledge. Being curious about God and his ways, being curious about the world around us, being curious, for example, about your spouse, wanting to get to know them better. Yeah. These are good expressions.
Because curiosity obviously is wanting to resolve a question.
Yeah.
Like fundamentally that's neutral.
Yeah.
And so it's curiosity plus what?
Yeah.
So it's curiosity plus pride, curiosity plus indulgence or desire, curiosity plus contentment. Like these are it's always with something else.
And you know what? There's a proverb. I'm going to have to look it up because I don't remember which proverb it is off the top of my head, but it's the glory of God to cover over a matter. And it's the glory of kings to search it out.
Yeah.
So it's this idea that God has hidden things for us to learn.
Yes.
And I mean, our society today is living proof of that. When you think of all the technological advances that have come about from people studying the created world.
Yeah.
And then learning, about physics through that, and then applying that physics to machinery, to like airplanes, helicopters, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. I'm oversimplifying it wildly, but
no.
The principle is there.
That's right. I think that gets down to the heart of it. You can get down to other details about how our curiosity came into existence. There's certain things, but that's
for sure. I hope that helps. Jolene Dobney, let me know. Okay, Linda Sue, Isaiah 49, verse 5-7. Is this referring to the Messiah or to the Israelites?
Let's read it.
Let's.
Verse 7? 49, verse 7?
5-7.
5-7. Starting verse 5. And now the Lord says, He who formed me from the womb to be his servant, to bring Jacob, that's Israel, back to him, and that Israel might be gathered to him. For I am honored in the eyes of the Lord, and my God has become my strength. He says, It is too light a thing that you should be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and to bring back the preserved of Israel. I will make you as a light for the nations, that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth. Thus says the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel and his Holy One, to one deeply despised, abhorred by the nation, the servant of rulers. Kings shall see and arise, princes, and they shall prostrate themselves, because of the Lord, who is faithful, the Holy One of Israel, who has chosen you. Okay, so I think this is clearly about Israel. I
was like, wait, what?
About the Messiah. But it's also about Israel, because you have here, from chapters around 40 onwards to 53 different things, a fluctuation between Israel being a servant and this suffering servant to come, this Messiah figure, who's a king, right? And these different things. A prophet and a king and a priest, they have this mix between them all. So Christ being the archetype, the fulfillment of Israel, represents all Israel. That's this idea. And so I think when you get in verse 5 here, where it says, who formed me from the womb to be his servant, that's very messianic. Very messianic. And he's talking to what? To bring Jacob, Israel, back to him, that Israel might be gathered to him. So
it switches from you are my servant. In verse 3, he said to me, you are my servant Israel, in whom I will display my splendor.
Yes.
It switches from you are my servant Israel to, and now the Lord says, he who formed me in the womb to be his servant, to bring Jacob back to himself and gather Israel to himself. So he's no longer speaking to Israel. He's speaking to an individual who will bring Jacob back and gather Israel. Who's
of Israel, who's going to return Israel.
Yes.
And so, but throughout this whole time, it's building up to this whole thing. And then Isaiah 53, of course, the forbidden chapter, is the quintessential passages about the Messiah, who is perfect, unblemished, sinless, perfectly righteous, who is, dies for our transgressions and saves us. That's not a nation anymore. It goes, so it's always coming back and forth. And the reason why is because nations are always categorically underneath a king. So a king represents a whole nation. So the Messiah is a king who represents all of Israel. So fundamentally, Christ is Israel, but he's also the king individually. So that's the reason why it goes back and forth.
There's some tension,
That's why, that's why the prophecies kind of go here. They go from nation down to individual, nation to individual, back and forth. It's because it's both and, because the individual represents the whole nation.
Yeah, the king of Israel is symbolic of all of Israel, but it also is distinct from all Israel.
That's exactly right. And you see this in so many different passages.
Yeah.
But it's even implied in the fact that the angel of the Lord who wrestled Jacob renamed Jacob Israel. And that angel of the Lord, of course, is the pre-incarnate Christ.
Yeah.
The Holy One who redeemed Jacob from all evil and forgave him his sins. AKA, only God could do that. So God, the angel of the Lord who was in the burning bush, who Moses identified as Yahweh, as God, who called himself God, the angel of the Lord, calls himself God in Exodus 3, is the man who wrestled Jacob.
Yeah, and Jacob even identifies that because he renames the place Peniel, meaning face of God.
Right.
I've seen the face of God.
It did not die.
Yeah.
Right? So he wrestles this man. So again, he wrestles a man. Doesn't say he had wings. Right? He said he wrestled a man.
Yeah.
And then later on in Genesis, he calls him the angel of the Lord, the angel who redeemed me from all evil. So again, the pre-incarnate Christ renamed Jacob Israel. He's the king.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that means. He's the king. And then he then becomes incarnate through Israel, right? Like Mary, who also represents Israel.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's so beautiful, symbolic relationship that's happening there. But so that's what I would say to that. I think it's clearly about Christ, but it's fluctuating back and forth between those
the
two.
prophecy itself goes back and forth, but I think
that portion
you can contextually, you can see where it switches into, now I'm speaking about an individual, now I'm speaking about all Israel.
Yes, you could see it. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because it would be weird to say Israel is called to bring Israel back. Like, what does that mean?
Would be strange.
It would be a weird contextual thing to say.
Now,
not of the Messiah, who is Israelite.
Especially what's identified as a person in the womb, not individuals.
Yes.
Right, but a person, like an individual in the womb.
All right. I think that's good. Let us know, Linda Sue, what you think about that. If anyone has any follow-up questions about what we read in Ezekiel this week, because I know Ezekiel is hefty. There's a lot of material in Ezekiel, and it's visions and prophetic literature, and it's historically rich because some of it happened, some of it's future. We're going to get to some of the future stuff on next weekend's program. But let me know if you have follow-up questions that you want us to discuss in upcoming episodes of the weekend show. You can, if you're watching on YouTube, comment section down below. If you're listening or watching on a different app, BibleDiscoveryTV.com. You can find our email address there. Shoot us a question and a comment. We'd love to pop it in the show. All right, guys, until next week, happy reading and studying.